I would like to welcome you all for this fifth session in Zwari Hall. This is going to be with Vishvesh Kandolkar in conversation with Mozinha Fernandes. And this is going to be about his book, Goa's Bomb Jesus as Visual Culture, the Basilica's Architecture, Image, History, and Identity. So welcome Mozinha and Vishvesh. Vishvesh Prabhakar Khandolkar is an associate professor at the Goa College of Architecture. His research on Goa's architectural history focuses on early modern church design as well as the evolution of Indo-Portuguese aesthetics from the colonial to the post-colonial period. His writing has appeared in peer-reviewed journals, including the Journal of the Society of Architectural Historians, Verge, Studies in Global Asias, the Oxford Journal of Hindu Studies, eTropic, the Journal of Human Values, and Economic and Political Weekly. And Mozinha is a professor of sociology in Goa University. So welcome, and over to you, Mozinha.
Soglang tumkan dio borodis dio. A very good afternoon to everyone. Today we are here to celebrate the work of the renowned writer Dr. Vishvesh Prabhakar Kandolkar. So, very good afternoon to everyone, and I thank Dr. Vishvesh for giving me this opportunity, and also the team of Gulf for giving me this opportunity, and it's my privilege to share the stage with Dr. Vishvesh Prabhakar. So, although ma'am has read about Dr. Vishvesh, I would like to say a few words about him and his work, and then in detail about his book. Dr. Vishvesh Prabhakar is Associate Professor at Goa College of Architecture, and he is a renowned writer. His research on Goa's architectural history focuses on early modern church design as well as the evolution of Indo-Portuguese aesthetics from the colonial to the post-colonial period. He is the author of the book Goa's Bomb Jesus as Visual Culture, the Basilica's Architecture, Image, History, Identity, for today which we are gathered here. The book chronicles the visual history of the Basilica of Bomb Jesus, one of the longest surviving churches from Goa's Portuguese colonial era. Kandolkar's art installation series, This Is Not the Basilica, drew from his research about the Basilica and was exhibited at the Sonaprant Goa Center for Arts in 2021. His writing has appeared in many peer-reviewed journals. And some of his research article, I'm going to just tell you about few, including Consuming Goa, Reclaiming Goan Identity Through the Feast of St. Francis Xavier, Reign in the Basilica, Protecting Goa's Bomb Jesus from the Ravages of Climate Change, and many more. So now I would like to talk more about his celebrated work. In fact, this moment is not only like, I'm in conversation or conversing with him, but I feel, and in fact, I'm sure that Dr. Vishwesh will agree to the fact that this moment is to celebrate his work, and that is titled as Goa's Bomb Jesus as Visual Culture, the Basilica's Architecture, Image, History, and Identity. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say, so please give a round of applause to our author, Dr. Vishvesh Prabhakar Kandolkar. So first of all, I will go into detail with his book. Then I will have some question to the author, and then the floor will be open for the audience for your observation, comments, and questions. Is it fine, Vishwesh? Okay. So now I'm going to talk more in detail about the book, Goa's Bomb Jesus as Visual Culture, the Basilica's Architecture, Image, History, and Identity. It is a scholarly work by the author that investigates into the Basilica of Bom Jesus of Goa. This 16th century church is renowned for housing the remains of Saint Francis Xavier, is a significant example of architecture and an UNESCO World Heritage Site. This book offers a comprehensive exploration of Basilica as a significant monument from Goa's Portuguese colonial era. His book explores the architectural design, its visual representation, historical context, and the evolving identity it embodies. The book is structured to provide an in depth analysis of Basilica's multifaceted significance. It examines the architectural elements that define the Basilica's style, the imagery associated with it, its historical evolution, and its role in shaping and reflecting Goan identity. To talk about the structure of the book, it has 163 pages and it provides an in depth research which flows across 6 chapters. In this book, Kandolkar examines Basilica's evolution through various lenses. He explores the design and structural changes of the basilica over time. He analyzes how basilica has been represented in photographs, souvenirs, advertisement, reflecting its role in Goan identity and tourism. In this book, the basilica is situated within the broader themes of history of Goa, considering colonial influences and post-colonial developments. The work discusses how the basilica has become a symbol of Goan heritage and its impact on the local and global perceptions of Goa. This research highlights the basilica's transformation from a colonial religious edifice to a modern cultural icon. He emphasizes the role of visual representations in shaping public perceptions and the ongoing debate surrounding its preservation and restoration. I will put it in the words of Dr. Vishvesh. I quote, "This book intervenes to fill the lacuna that exists around the study of architecture and its relationship to Goan identity as a disciplinary investment in understanding the uniqueness of the territory of Goa." I unquote. R. Benedito Ferrão, in his research paper titled Unseeing Goa's Bom Jesus in Vishvesh Prabhakar Kandolkar's work, This is Not a Basilica, he comments, and I quote him, critical of the colonial practices that have allowed the basilica to deteriorate, ultimately Kandolkar's exhibit offer a view of how the study of visual culture can decolonize our understanding of the linkages between built heritage and cultural identity. I unquote. So with this, I will have some discussion with Vishwesh. Vishwesh Bab, we can start?
Yeah, Korea, Suru Korea.
Okay. So my first question for you would be, what was your inspiration behind writing this book?
First of all, thank you so much for Gulf and the team and Mozinha, Professor Mozinha, for the wonderful introduction. I would say the inspirations are many. There was a lot of things which is going around, but I also feel one of the critical things that which always comes to my mind is the contemporary consumption of Goan images. So if you've seen around, there are lots of things about Goa which is being put up, and we've seen many. For example, there are Instagram influencers now using Goa as a platform for showcasing images. So my interest is in images, looking at images and saying why and how these images are being unfolded. So I'll just show you one interesting image in that respect.
Yes.
Of course, I'll talk more. This was a email I received It was from Intermiles. You must have seen Intermiles send you some promotional thing. So, and obviously Intermiles perhaps don't know that I am from Goa, and so they send me this image and they says, "Have you seen Goa like no one has seen before?"
Oh,
And if you see the image, it's like slowly uncovering Goa, so to see, and it's saying that there are a lot of hidden jewels that you need to explore. So it's like from the beach bed lying on the coast, you're opening up to a jewels of Goa, which is interior of Goa, and what they open up to you is the Basilica. So for me, this is the continuous motif which has been there. And the question that I ask is that why always the Basilica? And there are many more. So that I begin with that kind of question is that why Basilica, and that became some of the inspiration to go into the in-depth study of the church itself.
okay. So, in your book, you discuss that Basilica is a site of visual culture. Can you elaborate on how the images and this artistic elements of the Basilica contribute to the construction of historical narratives and collective memory in Goa? Could be with an example.
Okay. Again, because I'm a visual kind of visual architectural historian, I will rely on images. Uh, I don't know. Albertina is not here. Albertina Almeida. So we went on a trip again to for students of Goa, and I don't know if you have seen this. This is in what was supposed to be Mini India Park. It was to promote real estate development, like supposed to have sprawling, large boats which would come in directly and supposed to sell part of Goa. This is along River Zuari, Kevalosine. And one of the things which they did in that building, one of the first things they put as a mini India Park was, of course, the Basilica itself. And I mean, this was an odd day for us. There was huge conges, which we know around Kortalim they were picking up. So again, a recurring theme has been the Basilica, where it has been the marker of this thing. So uh, when we think about visual culture, we want to think about what are the things which are getting consumed and how. So here is an example where a building is removed from its religious, or it's removed from its direct cultural significance and function, and being now becoming a site for neoliberal property promotion, for instance. And there are other examples, like for example, generally every piece of on old Goa would be accompanied by, sorry, there was one more image. I don't have that image. But they would be accompanied by a lot of images of the basilica. So the question again was that why is the basilica such a recurring theme? So it comes out, and it's not just, we will talk more, but throughout the long history of the basilica, it has been the monument which is being kind of obsession of a lot of Goans for different kind of things. So that has been partly the reason.
Okay, one of the statement from your book which caught my attention was where you state that Goan culture is detached from those who made it and it is offered for consumption of others. You just gave an example of that, but I was more interested in knowing more about why you do say this statement in your book.
I think so. When like a lot of, like there's these three P's in culture. There is perspective that you want to think about, there are practices, and there are products. So what usually happens is that the practices and perspectives are kept aside and you want to consume the product. So in today's time, when you want to think about Goa, it's become a brand where you want to consume it, but you want to think about how can you consume and what can be consumed. So you start thinking about like products. In this case, architecture, for instance, there is a long history to the building, but you want to consume it in a way that it doesn't necessarily have to be part of your own culture, and it's all right. And this has been happening for a long time. For example, tourism, again, it began in generally as a first tourist train, for example, which moved from was in the UK, and this Thomas and Cook did the first trip. So people were traveling to a different place and consuming something different which is not part of their own culture. So it is a very common thing that you start consuming things outside the realm of a thing. But when it gets consumed in the name of culture, or in the name of brand, or in the name of Goa, that you come, you do the things. Like for example, you're coming to Goa for a destination wedding, you're coming and doing the wedding, you're doing the same dance, you're eating the same food, dal curry or whatever. You go eating and you're going, but you're doing it in Goa. So there is nothing in which you are engaging with Goa. There's no proper way in which you are engaging with Goa. In which case, there is there is the site. In this case, the site could be the beachside location. There is this identity or thinking about Goa, but the consumption is not necessarily tied to its cultural. There's no informed way in which you want to engage with the place. So in which case it is becoming packaged for quick consumption and not necessarily engagement with locals, which is why I'm saying that it's getting detached, and which is why we are seeing images like this which are detached from its connection to anything which is cultural or people themselves.
So this book engages more about the local histories of Goa, which is a very important part and very important aspect which you have highlighted in your book. As I know that you engage and discuss with your students of the course of architecture and society, uh, this I would like to bring to the focus point, the book How Kon. And I know that you have been discussing this with your students, which was as visualized by late Professor Alito Sequeira. And in your book, you also talk about the collective Goan identity, whereas Hong Kong, like it's more about like one single identity, like people coming out and telling about their identity, but your book is more of the collective Goan identity, that people of Goa are relating to the Saint Francis Xavier as Goinso Sahib. Would you like to focus on this with few points?
Um, Thank you so much. I've not thought about it so much, but when I bought Hong Kong as a book to discuss in the classroom, my intention was to promote. First of all, Alito, of course, and it's a wonderful book, Hong Kong. If you have not seen it, you should get it. Where a lot of local Goan scholars, I would say students, scholars who are working with Alito, was writing about their stories. And many of the stories are not heard about or not thought about. And you would think about reversing the gaze. Like we are not looking at this place as a place where you want to think about it as an object, but thinking of your own memory and your experience. So my purpose of bringing the book in the classroom was to first of all promote Goan authors, writers who've been engaging with issues about what does it mean to belong, and not just belong but to live in this place or to think about. And it has its own problems, like there are problems of caste, for example, which has been spoken about in the book How Ko. Now there are questions of tribe. People are ashamed or made ashamed of when they want to speak about their tribe or their caste. Or the question is that tu kon is not necessarily a question of what's your name and what's your education, but tu kon is a question like, where are you from, what is your caste background, or kind of socially locating you. So the purpose of getting the book into the classroom was to engage, at least tell the architect students how can you think about your own identity with respect to this, and listen to these scholars who are talking about Goa, which in a more complex way. You're not thinking about only the beach and other thing in which it is glamorized. So in that sense, when I think about the collective identity of Goa, usually the project of making a collective identity is that of the nation. And we know, like for example, how every nation, like in MAGA in America right now, is trying to make America great again. And there is a focus in thinking about what is American. Similarly, there is also the way in which you want to think about what is Indian, and there is the Indian history which is promoted, right? So when you think about identity, there are these practices, there are these icons, there are these buildings which become the feature of some of the things. So in that sense, I think so. One of the continuous long-term icon which has been attached to Goa has been Goicho Sahib, Saint Francis Xavier, and what becomes and the reason why the monument in which his relics are housed becomes a common icon is because of him, in the sense that what happens is that there's some kind of secularization of identity which is happening. So it's moving from rather than focusing on St. Francis Xavier itself as a symbol of Goa, it moves from the building in which it is housed. So there is this detachment which has happened, which is what I've tried to do in the book itself. But yeah, we tend to hold on to some of these long-term icons to project it as an entity, but not necessarily in a way that you want to only objectify it. If you're internalizing it, then yes, but not necessarily purely using it like object. Although Basilica has had a very glamorous afterlife in many other fields.
Okay. So in your book, you give this historical importance and the many various challenges which you have faced in compilation of this work, mostly through archives. So, could you bring out some of the challenges which you faced in building up this genealogy of the whole basilica?
I mean, this is mostly for the students of many of the students or many of the young scholars who are there. See, the amount of information in archival look which is there in Goa is tremendous. It's huge amount of things. It can take a small example. Like, for example, if you've been to St. Cajetan's Church, there is a well at the center of it. I was just trying to search for one image at the center just to share it with my friend. And then I came across one Flickr account, and the history that is told on the thing is saying that, oh, this is supposed to be a Hindu temple at some point of time, and today they're covering it, and you can go and it's like you want to go and find out the data. Now, what happens is that when you're looking at the archive, and I saw the archive, one thing I came across this particular history in 1859 book, I think. So there's a small footnote which was telling about there was a Father Manco who was supposed to be in charge of constructing this building. This building is a 7th century building. It is a building which is coming up in Old Goa, St. Cajetan's Church. I may not have the image of it, but it's that round church with a dome just before you go to the ferry. So it is being built much later. Like, for example, the Basilica is consecrated in 1605. So it's early modern period. But that is, it's almost being built around 1761 or 1665 approximately. So it is a period when you can say Goa was on a downhill. So the building does two things. It questions whether old Goa was on a downhill, or even when it is going downhill, the things are being, big buildings are being constructed. The building belongs to Theatine's order, which is coming from Rome, and which is why they're trying to depict the Roman thing. But for me, what is interesting is that this local history, smaller history, when you look at the archives and look at the specific history, this Father Manco, there was 4 huge columns to take that large dome on top, and the dome, two walls of it kept on collapsing, so they were not able to construct. So what they did is that they did a well inside to drain off the water from the surrounding area and then take the water away. Essentially, the idea was it was a constructional technique in order to drain the excess water because it is very close to the river. Now, that is the genesis of the well there. But today, on the other hand, there'll be a lot of other parallel stories which will be spin around and spoken about. So we scholars or historians don't do that kind of work of thinking of what is the history of it. Like today, if you want to say, despite my or anybody else's proper historical definition of why the place is there, it's a different story. But you want to make a parallel story or Instagram story out of it and make a very quick impression of what the place is, then it's going to be complete another thing. And because there are so many influencers, that because there is so many concurrent historical reference which is being given about Goa, and because everything what is about Goa gets read, there are all the other histories which gets pulled up. So the job and the thing about archive is that you can do very small, simple histories of the place, which could be interesting.
Okay, thank you, Vishwesh. I just have a comment to say, and since there are students of sociology, history, philosophy here, I think that this book integrates history, architecture, sociology, cultural studies, and it gives an interdisciplinary approach which will enhance our understanding of Goa's religious heritage. So I think everybody should read this book. Okay, shall I go?
First. You go.
I have more questions. Okay. So, how do you see Basilica visual culture influencing modern Goan identity?
Uh, Yeah, thanks again. I will just very quickly again. I
Okay.
mean, sometimes it's very difficult for a lot of when I do this. Some of the talks is to ask like how many of you have seen or how many of you think that this basilica was plastered before? And a lot of people have no idea, right? So many of this in this class will think that since my father's generation, this building has been always having no plaster; it's exposed. And that's why what happens is that as a common public culture, we get this brown building which gets everywhere. But we have, I mean, there is, I mean, even this picture, for instance, the basilica was always plastered from 1605 to all the way to 1952, 1951 maybe. The question, therefore, is that when you're building the modern heritage, how do you really say modern, and what is this whole complexity of saying modern? When do we say something is modern? And I was just having a talk with Lester in the morning, and I was telling, I mean, we were discussing the idea that the modernism and conservation as a practice to conserve something as old came together. Modern means you want to show new things, but you can only show new things when you can show that you have a great old past. So in that sense, Salazar, what he did was that he wanted to show this building as that really something old, Goa Antigua, or very old. And so what he did was that he removed the plaster of this building to make it look very old. So in the sense that he was trying to, there's a political history around it, which is partly covered in the book. But when you think about it, how does act of making something old gets problematic is that eventually, and I mean, of course, this is planned and we can talk more. Eventually, what happens is that if you look at the right hand side, that if even when you start thinking, this is the Jesuit church on the left, the mother church, where the right hand of St. Francis Xavier is in this church. So this is a church. Didn't influence it exactly because you can see a lot of very different kind of take of the thing. But eventually, my question also is that if at a particular time period that we want to go and age the building, and then this problem kind of continues to this age. So how do we accept history and how do you go? So in that sense, the genealogy to say that okay, at this point of time there's a historical mistake which is being happening and you need to undo it. If you want to think about it as an object of popular this thing, then you want to keep it in the same image, but it's not. It's a religious building with very um, popular acceptance among all the locals, in fact. So in that sense, culturally, it becomes very difficult for you to think about it as a icon which can transcend the two times. So it is having a history, and you require to respect that kind of.
Okay. One more question. There is this whole debate about this tension between preservation. You have spoken about it, but preservation of the basilica.
Yeah. Again, the tension prevails because I was just going through the archives and I saw that they say that Goans, young Goans or old Goans will not like that the basilica will be plastered because then it is not that history that they have lived. One of the difficulties about history and genealogy is to think about a timeline. Like what is old, and in like generally when we talk about, we ask somebody what is old, we say te poiliche. So this is old, and then you say if there's something older, te ani poiliche. The difference is ani. There is no exact timeline. So we are not historical in that sense because we are not able to place timings. We're not able to think about our history in terms of timeline. So in that sense, 451 years is a long time period. This building is consecrated in 1605. So if you think about timeline, more than 400 years. So we are unable to think about its timeline in terms of what it does to its long history. So when we say that it's being unplastered or removed of its plaster for a particular timeline, we are not able to see it as, oh, this was other church which I could. We are not able to, this 51 image by Mario Chico's thing, and you can still see it plastered. So we are not able to think about its long past. So there is this difficulty in comprehending history, which is not of our generation, but which perhaps is of previous generation. And that difficulty in not being able to accepting something which is not happening in our own past or our father's past is a difficulty we get trapped into. So there are these traps, different traps that we fall into. This becomes a trap of historical trap, and therefore even the conservation practitioners or other people are not willing to take a decision saying, oh, let's plaster it because we think that somebody is going to be offended. And apparently it is. I mean, I was overhearing one old father, I forget his name, Visita Sound, Father Visita Sound. He was telling me that apparently Indira Gandhi came for a tour of Old Goa. She saw the building and said, कितना अच्छा है. And somebody said, इसको plaster करने का है. तो नहीं नहीं अच्छा दिखता है. So it's also like, sometimes these political things about keeping the building as a old it is, just अच्छा दिखता है तो रखने का. दिल्ली ने बोला है तो
Yes.
कोर्चे पोटल है. And so now it's not necessarily the same Gandhi, but some other kind of political powers saying, okay, we need to keep in. But there is this whole debate about how do you want to think about histories of building, and this building becomes like a common talking point that you can think about through one focus, and you can speak about it. I'll just give you an example, just last example.
Okay.
Why the Basilica? And just 3 days, but there was a short video by Varoufakis, who is a old. He was, I think, so the finance minister of Greece before. So he was talking about, and he was asked a question that there is this whole war in Gaza. So why focus only in Gaza? There are many other wars which are happening elsewhere. Why focus on Gaza? And he gave he's saying that it's not that we are against other wars and other atrocities which is happening across the world. But there are some wars which becomes representative of everything else which is happening. So historically, he's thinking about this event as something that you can really pitch for and get support for, because that represents really a terrible situation into the world history which is happening right now. That represents everything, even though in Congo, in many other places, there are other things which is happening. So one war represents all the other things. So in that sense, also this question was there. Like in Goa, what is it that you can talk about as a common cultural identity? You can speak about this place, and it becomes the Basilica. That if you speak about the Basilica, it represents many other buildings. It is not to say that there are no other important or interesting buildings in this place. There are many, but it becomes like this building becomes symbolic of being able to talk about many other things. So in that sense, there's a parallel to be made.
And I think your fifth chapter brings out what you have spoken. That's about the relics as a political device, wherein you talk about the exposition, you speak about the state have employed modern technology like photography, videography, or architectural conservation to create an illusion of the enduring legacy of the Portuguese Empire in Goa by perpetuating a narrative of historical continuity and influence. That's what just you have explained. So you have beautifully brought out it in your fifth chapter. So shall we? Okay. So with this, I have more questions, but due to time, I would like to.
Orange. Please. What is? Yeah. Okay. Oh. Yeah. Do that. Say.
Yes. Okay. Okay. I would like to talk something more about your
Um,
in PPT. Okay, I can ask questions. Yeah. So, what are the challenges did you face in tracing the basilica's historical evolution, which you have already focused on the genealogy, particularly in terms of understanding how it represents both religious and political shifts in Goa's colonial past?
Um, you know, there is a chapter which I do this little work on thinking about how propaganda plays a very important role in thinking about buildings. So when you have an architectural building and it is being built for any purpose, when you see the building finished, there's always an agenda behind the building. Sometimes the agenda is that immediately of the patron, because it's usually architects are only the messengers of the patron, and the patron could be a family who's having money to build it, or it could be the state. When the state is the patron, every building is a political device. It's a political device to send a message. And it is not only buildings, but there was also things like the relics, for instance. For instance, I showed there is, for instance, this was a gift. The marble statue and the till the railings there was a gift from Medici's, right? But how is the gift being, or what? How is at that time the Portuguese and Jesuits, they gave the pillow on which the head of the Saint Francis Xavier was resting, and they gave it to them, saying, "Here is the gift." So as a reward or as an exchange, they gave the base of the tomb, right? So when you think about it, what is this doing? This exchange is doing to the basilica, but also to the two states. It's like these exchanges become soft power in which you want to think about building relationships. So Medicis are very powerful, but they don't have an empire. At the same time, Portuguese are not powerful anymore, but they want to have connections. So then you start using things like soft power, in this case relics, for instance. And what happens is that since exchange of relics is that you start getting a monument like this in old Goa. In fact, there was a discussion of thinking about monuments in Goa, and there was a very old document which is there, which is 1927 document, I think, so which talks about tourism in Goa. And they said, what does Goa have in terms of tourism? Nothing. The only good-looking structure is this mausoleum which is there. Only good-looking thing, because the Florentine mausoleum. Nothing else is good, because India has Khajuraho or something else. There are a lot of better monuments. So if the tourists from Europe have to come to India There are a lot other monument which is interesting in the rest of India. Goa doesn't have anything great. So if there's anything which is, can be offered in 1927, anything can be which we can offer are the golden beaches because they are warm enough all throughout the year. So this is being said in 27 in a document which was prepared for for I think so there was a small commission which was trying to locate Goa and Goa's tourism. So when you think about architectural history of Goa, why is it then Basilica's architecture is been seen as not so great, or only this is seen as great? And if you really go there, if you see this place, the monument is insufficient. You cannot appreciate the monument fully because you cannot go around it. You cannot see it from a distance. So it's really not in a best lighted place among other things. So it's not, if you think about it, it's not even architecturally well located. So then again the question is then how does Basilica come to symbolize Goa? Because even if I also make a claim, not a claim but a discussion that if you see the Say Cathedral, I think so. I'm surely having an image of it, don't I? Yeah, if you see the Say Cathedral, it is a much bigger church. It's huge in terms of the size. In terms of its architecture, it's far more grander, right? In terms of the way in which it is built is really exquisite. So the question is that why did this building didn't become that focus of iconic, so to say? And there are this odd kind of questions that you need to place in to think about history. Like why this building didn't become, and this is 1890 picture, but also I want to think about through buildings like how does building start becoming iconic. So in that sense, whenever in the original time, and I say that the iconicity of this building became even more pronounced due to photography. So one of the works I do is to think about how photography renders itself to make monuments more iconic. In this case, they say that this building came already decorated to become famous because as a last minute act, what the facade of this, if you can see that dark colored, it is a dark colored stone coming from Bassin, and they bought the stone, they carved the stones, they built all they did a column with it, they did the architrave and all the detailings with it. And when you start clicking a picture of it, then the focus, if you look at this picture, your focus really comes to the building itself. So it's the photography which comes to Goa in 1884 because of Sousa and Paul. I mean, it has come earlier. This building is clicked. This building is, and this photograph is from 1855 by this is before. If you look at it, it's even before they start building the side buttress walls, which you see today. So it's a very old picture, but it becomes iconic because of its own architecture and design. So a completely and thoroughly not such a great building, but a building which survives because of Saint Francis Xavier, a building which uh, keeps on keeps on going despite all the odds, and eventually this building becomes that face which we have seen. It becomes iconic in much far more than the basilica itself. But also, if I go previous to the previous image, you can see that like if you had to click a typical picture from down, the whitewashed stones against the blue sky will not give you that contrast. So in that sense that even when if you are an artist, that doesn't give you the contrast. So in the black and white picture, the cathedral couldn't become as striking as the basilica would be, not in color, in the black and white pictures. And there was also this idea about golden Goa. Like when you think about golden Goa, the golden Goa, I think so. The idea we can think about gold, but in photographic, the gold is not coming into photography till 1950s because there is no color. So when 1884 they were clicking pictures, if there was a photographic gold, it would be the black and white contrast which the monument would give. So in that sense, the golden of the basilica later is that of the stonework which gives it the contrast and makes it a kind of a far more interesting photographic subject. So there's something about it which is even more than the construction history, religious history because of Saint Francis
Cultural
Xavier,
function also.
cultural function among all those things, but also its own iconicity, which renders itself to become famous. So there is a longer debate about it, and which is what something that I try to.
Incorporate in your book. Okay, I think we can open the floor for questions now.
Great.
Any comments, observation, and any questions? Sushit, can you just pass the mic?
I think in your meeting.
That was a wonderful presentation, Dr. Kandolkar, if I may. And I just have one question to ask of you. There may be others that will pop up soon. But as an architect, your study of the Basilica and wandering around, I've not been able to get a copy of the book. I wonder if it's being sold today. It is? Okay. But what is your assessment of the exact state of disrepair? And is the laterite and the gaps perhaps in the laterite a cause for leakage and therefore a cause for concern in the future? And that is why most of the architects I know would like to see the basilica plastered again to save it from further deterioration. What's your opinion?
uh, there are two ways to think about it. One is one Father Patricio, who is been in constant touch regarding the basilica with us and some other people in the field, and we have done several visits there, and he's been noticing it every year that the kind of post monsoons, uh, the wetness or moistness of the walls, they don't go off so fast. They take long time to either the surface level of water is increased because there's so much of concretization which is happening around Old Goa that there's no place for the water to be absorbed down. So that's one. But secondly, there's also this whole thing about the intensity of rainfall itself has increased. Now, what it does is that, one of the things I argue is that when we think about climate change, we think about climate change, then we think about the melting ice in Antarctica, right? Or that lost penguin somewhere. So our image is always of the, we are supporting what again the European West. We look westwards for everything, even the climate effects. We don't look at anywhere else. There's no other poverty. And of course, the other thing which we see is that cracked fields. But we know cotton soil is good for cracked soil because it oxygenates, and then when it rains, it'll be good. But what we don't see is the other icons which can be talked about as climate change. And what I want to present is also that Basilica is that icon for thinking about even climate change and how. Two things. One is, see, in to 2020 there was a rain in the Basilica, rain literally in the Basilica, because and it was mismanagement with the ASI and mismanagement with the thing, and that because of COVID that kept the thing open and the rain came, and apparently the rain came right inside the Basilica. So when I think about it, rain in the Basilica is, it's not even breaching, like for 450 or 400 years the rain was not in the Basilica, and after, so it's a moment when we can think about, it's also like it's a climate emergency which makes the rain come in the Basilica. It's not just our mishandling of things, it's also a metaphoric symbolic moment in which the rain is in the Basilica. And the reasons for intensity and increase in rainfall is not, there are many, right? And a lot of environmental, uh, with Trump coming in at the center now, we want to deny that there is any kind of man-made disaster which is creating climate change, for instance. So we will not be able to think about why local factors won't be responsible for climate change. And in Goa, what I want to think about is that the breach in the Basilica is also the breach of our own identity. Like, there is certain kind of thing where it's come to a point where you want to think about why is something which is getting beyond the point of return. So in this case, rain in the Basilica is the image that I would want to post. Then you think about it, that if there's a climate change and there is a melting glacier somewhere, where will the extra water go? The extra water will not remain in the North Pole. The extra water will come to your tropics. So if there is a glacial ice which is melting in the North Pole, the effect of it is felt in the tropics. So effect is felt in Panjim, effect of it is felt in Old Goa. So even if the climate imagery, the image that you want to sell it by is the North European countries, then the effect of it is like Pakistan, which happened, this flooding which happened in Pakistan, or Goa or Kochi, for instance, which is suffering. So the reality of the thing is also that we want to think about local realities when we want to think about global climate emergencies which is happening elsewhere, and which is why again Basilica is a good example, because with the laterite stone, the cultural, architectural, material history that it speaks about, those bridges are speaking. So this time, for instance, just to give you a direct example, I spoke to a, I think, geology student who was doing her She was doing this small test on the surface of the St. Augustine's Church, looking at effects of moss on this. So this time, for the exposition, they cleaned up the basilica. But what did they use? They used like very corrosive chemical to clean up, which will take away the moss, but it will also take away one more little more layer, and it might be But a building which lasts for 50 years, you go on reducing will how much? So another 450 years, every time we do the action, it will reduce, right? So the effect is also that there is a engineering side to it. That there is no way in which you can protect the surface of the basilica, because now also what is happening because of the crevices, you also have the pollution, like there's a dust pollution. So when the pollution hits the surface, you will, and with the chemicals, there will be another reaction which is happening. So, and they've done enough studies of laterite in Cambodia and other places to showcase that you requires a sacrificial layer. So whitewash is not, I also want to, like, people think that if you do a whitewash plaster on top of it, that it should look clean and neat. No, that plaster is supposed to be tortured and falling apart, and but it will happen to that plaster, which is why it is called a sacrificial layer, and that is something which can protect it. So there is this enough studies being done to establish that it should be done, but whether it will be done is a different story.
Any other questions?
I just want to say thank you for this book. It's really amazing, and it's been years in the making. And it's so good to see our own history written, and which we can identify with. We can make sense of. We can, put context to what is going on around us. We can rally behind it, and I would like to ask you, you've been talking for many years about monuments, and a very important points you've made about how monuments play a role in the political sphere of our life. So now this thought is very important, and how do you plan to, move it out of these intellectual spheres to the common man to understand what is going on actually? Because as you said, monuments and structures are being used to further an agenda. So how do you have any take on how you could go further with this? Thank you.
Yeah, while I must warn that while it is an accessible book on Goan history, it is very dense. It is meant for academic publications, and where it is supposed to be establishing concretely by this thing. So it's not an easy read, or it's not like something which you can do take a read like a novel, so to say. So it's more like a reference book for basic historians to look at some of this data and a lot of other things. But going forward, I think so. I don't have a. It's very difficult. I think so that, but there is a need for a popular history, which needs to be spoken about. And I've been thinking about, like, and how can you tell a simple popular histories of this place? And it's not easy. It's not easy to tell a popular local history. So, and sometimes I feel that stand-up comedians do a better job at trying to talk about identity or inform you than perhaps historians or academicians can do. So there's no easy way out. I don't think so. There's an easy way out that unless we historians stand up and tell some jokes, catch the attention, and then deliver the thing. It's like just lulling you before you can give the punch or something else. So I don't know. I really don't know that if there is a better way, and it's quite depressing. Like of things which is happening last 1 or 2 months. Even as a writer or this thing, it's very depressing. You cannot look at the news, you cannot look at the things and the reality. You can just see the deluge of things which are happening in the world. So it's not easy. But on the other hand, I would like to quote Achille Membe. And Achille Membe says that we require entanglement. In the sense, we require to be entangled with that kind of communities who can speak to each other. So even if we don't have necessarily the global reach, but maybe we have something called care. We can have a smaller things, and we need to talk about the smaller histories to each other and tell those stories in order to reach out. So if we are able to do that and create networks of people who can rally behind each other's ideas, then perhaps there's something which is there. But otherwise, generally, if you want to bring it in the forefront, if you want to bring it in the limelight, if you want to make it as a central, there is no center. Will not. Center is already right. It won't. There's no place for smaller histories. There's no place for minor histories. It's only going to be on the periphery. So the only way that you can do it is to really create a network of people who could do these smaller histories and tie together and then speak about it in those on those forums. And there are students and many other people who are interested in it. It's just that we need to get those connections going. Interesting. He's a very interesting case study. So one of the first times I met Vamana Navelkar, is an artist, and so he gave me a book of Pessoa, which was in Portuguese. So when he gave the book, I said Portuguese. I said, "Arey, Vaman Bab maka Portuguese waspa kolche na." So he's saying, "Shikpak zai, amchi heritage thi." Now somebody like Vamana Navelkar telling you like here is a book and read this book and it's Pessoa, and Pessoa is like far more philosophical writer than anybody can be at that time, and he was also persecuted in his own time. Salazar didn't want Pessoa. Salazar was not. Pessoa became famous only after Salazar is gone. He was not famous in his lifetime as a poet. So and when Vamana Navelkar gave it to me and he was talking about it and his own works, which dealt with a lot of thematically Catholic imageries such as mother and child, Christ on the cross, and among other things. And when you think about really where is this location of culture in terms of Goa, and I think so there's location of culture is far more across than any religious identity in terms of these broader strokes of religion, I would say. It is there in the other forms. So I would not, in that sense, I'm Catholic. Okay, and we all are Catholic because we imbue this culture. It is not. I think so. It's something which we imbue, and I mean, I can say I'm a Buddhist also, and I'm so and so, and I don't want to be like Shashi Tharoor saying I'm Hindu or everybody's Hindu just because of something else. So the religious identities are, and this is also this Haukon.
Yes.
Who am I? Who am I is a very difficult question because I don't think so. The religious identities or other identities become such a thing. But thanks so much. It's an interesting question.
We'll wind up. So for those who are interested to understand this comprehensive analysis on the Basilica through the visual culture, which represent Goan culture, Vishvesh's book offers a valuable insight. And although the copies are sold out here, it will be available. It's okay. They are available for purchase here and also through academic publishers and other book retailers. So I thank Dr. Vishvesh and the audience for their patience, listening, hearing to us, and me in conversation with Dr. Vishvesh Kandolkar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Mozinha. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mozinha Fernandes and Dr. Vishvesh. Our next session will start in 5 minutes, which is a presentation by Dr. Smita Dalvi.